Okay, got it. Okay, well, thank you guys all for coming to listen to what I have to say this morning. I hope it gives you some food for thought. I talked about here at one of our meetings. I said I'm going to do a talk, but I can't think of a topic. And Terry said, "Stop trying to think of a topic, and it'll come to you." And so I said, okay. And for the next 2 weeks, easy. Everything, the word imagination kept popping up. It was on a TV commercial. It was in an email that I got. It was everywhere. I said, oh, imagination. That's what it's supposed to be. I'm going to go there. This is what I'm supposed to do. And so I started consuming everything I could think of, reading excerpts from books, going to podcasts, looking at articles in journals, and I couldn't narrow the topic. I said, look at all this stuff, and I couldn't come to any kind of meaningful conclusion of what I was going to say about imagination. And then I realized, I heard Terry, I hadn't stopped trying yet, right? I was still trying too hard. And so I slowed down and relaxed, and it came to me. I wasn't using my imagination. So if I start to get into it, perhaps something will come to me. So the quote that I've always heard a lot when you talk about imagination, people have it on their bumper stickers and t-shirts and stuff, is imagination is more important than knowledge, right? That Einstein, got real popular for a while for that to be everywhere. But I like the full quote. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we now know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and to understand. And I just like that. When I used to teach school, I always began a class, or I tended to begin class, free association. Like what the topic was going to be, freedom or something. I'd have people free associate with the word, and we'd put it on the board and make all kind of, charts out of it. It turns a listener into a participant. And I can't really do that today, but I thought maybe I'd pose a few questions that could maybe stimulate your thinking about this while I'm talking. So what is imagination? Would be what I might tell my students. Is it a skill that can be learned? Is it a state of being that we grow out of when we get older? Is it a spark that ignites creativity? Is it something you can mine, or is it something that you should avoid? Something that you're uncomfortable sharing, or something that you're very eager to share with others? And so I said, I'm going to take a moment for myself and do kind of free association. What's the first word that popped up? And divine was the word that popped into my mind. And after thinking about it, I said, imagination is a divine gift, right? It's a characteristic of our divine creation. And so I thought, yes, we are a product of God's imagination, right? And as is all of creation. And I imagined the picture. I'm a pictorial thinker, and so I imagined the chapel of the Sistine, or the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and the scene where you've got, God and Adam representing mankind with their fingers touching, then that spark of imagination being transferred over into us in a divine manner. And it brought this to my mind. It was a daydream-like kind of thing, right? Of this bringing that picture to life. And so when I thought about that, I said, guess what? Maybe we are imagination at our essence. And your feelings might be totally different from mine. I tend to have these little flights of fancy in my thinking. I'm not as grounded as a reasoned person. So then I started thinking, how can I present something kind of with a message? I had way too much information, and I said, well, what can I do? I decided I would first bring the information down and focus through a lens of a Christian perspective. I had a lot of that. I had lots from other places, but that was the tradition that I was raised in. And so I said, I'll go there. And then, half the information was, I could put that aside and go on. The first person that kept coming up everywhere, and I was being led to William Blake. Do you guys know him? 18th century poet, mystic, painter. Yeah, cool guy. And his contemporaries thought he was mad. He had all these weird ways of thinking and everything. His work is filled with a lot of symbology, kind of a, very imaginative, dreamlike quality to his work. And he said once that imagination, as he embraced it, was the body of God. And I found this really cool thing that I'd never seen before, so I'll mention it. There's reconciliation ecologists. I don't know if you have run into these guys, but I looked at one of their newsletters, and they use a quote from William Blake at the beginning. And these are guys that are trying to bring us back into oneness with nature. And that's the only way that, well, for them, it's everything. And so this is one of the full quotes from what they partially used at the beginning of their newsletter. It's William Blake in a letter to the Reverend John Trussler in 1799. The tree which moves some to tears of joy is in the eyes of others only a green thing which stands in the way. Some see nature all ridicule and deformity, and by these I shall not regulate my propositions or my portions, and some scarce see nature at all. But to the eyes of the man of imagination, nature is imagination itself. As a man is, so he sees. So Blake also wrote, imagination is not a state. It is the human existence itself. That was one of the ones that made people think he was mad. Imagination is the real and eternal world of which this vegetable universe is but a faint shadow. He said, imagination, the divine vision. So with imagination, you are seeing divinely. I love this image. Imagination seen through God's eyes, looking at creation and seeing it as good, seeing what the possibilities are, seeing the bigger picture, imagining ourselves as pure love, pure compassion, and feeling what God intended us to feel, using our gift of a divine imagination. Now, I found a few other authors that had interesting points of view. Adrienne Cardon, she's a poet and she's also an author, and she's writing from her point of view as a follower of LDS, Latter-day Saints. She said she needed to invigorate her faith. She wasn't excited about it anymore. And she thought, well, you know what? I need to embrace imagination. And she had thought that she was being told she should put it away because it was a childish thing, right? You should put imagination away. And she said, guess what? When I did that, I lost all my wonder. And she realized that her faith tradition, she said, think about my faith tradition, because she's writing to a general audience. She's asking me to believe in angels and golden tablets and all kinds of things that are of imagination to many. And she said that she has to buy into a standard beyond what secular minds can fathom. And now when people come up to her and say, why does she stay faithful? She said, because of my imagination and because of God's. And she said, she had a couple of quotes that I really liked. She said, my reason anchors me, but it is my imagination that buoys me. It's a nice combining of a balancing of the mind and the heart there. And she feels that many neglect their spiritual creativity, and you should start looking at it more, because she felt so much better after she connected there. I found another guy, his initial, I don't know what his name is, T.M. Moore, writing from a Celtic perspective. He wrote an article, said, why does imagination matter? And he feels that it's such an important part of a life of faith. And he bemoans the fact that when you're teaching people how to, I guess in traditional settings, how to, what your spiritual practices should be, and how you should teach others as a pastor or whatever, they don't get into any of this. They don't teach it as a skill. And he said it's a skill, and a lot of people have lost it. And so he gives research from this fellow who's Stephen Asma, and he is a professor of philosophy, but his specialty is imagination. And so a professor of imagination is kind of cool. And he describes imagination as one of the earliest human abilities. It was with us from the very beginning, going back hundreds of thousands of years, because thinking with imagery, it well preceded language. And by thinking with imagery is the way that they worked out their hunting, and how they get along with each other, and how they could see from another's perspective, how they could see from an animal's perspective, how they could extend what was happening in the real world. And he said, imagination has the power to turn our minds offline. And it's extremely important today for us to be able to do that. And then he said, once you do that, you can converse in the ancient tongue of pictorial language, which is internal, and you can gain insights that you cannot gain through language alone. So that's interesting. I'm trying to get perspectives from scientists and theologians, and I'm finding they all have something to say about this. Now, here's a guy, Ernesto Tinajero, and he talked about the spiritual power of imagination in his newsletter of the group that he's a part of called the Sojourners. It's a social justice Christian organization. And he's a gentleman who's blind in one eye and has been his whole life. And so he said, I only see in 2D. I don't see in 3D. And he said he got really taken with this case of this woman who had a similar situation to him. And she was able to learn how to see in 3D. And she had I think they call it a developmental doctor that helped her do that. And the article goes on to say the way she did it was the doctor said, before you go and see something, you're going to go out to take a walk with somebody here, imagine that scene in 3D. Imagine seeing this side and then seeing the other side of this thing and the other side, and seeing it from different angles and all. And she now got that practice down, and she could see things in 3D for the first time. That's kind of interesting. I don't know how that actually would work, but he said it wasn't that whether it worked or didn't work that really was interesting to him. What was interesting to him was the power of imagination. And they said, what if you have this true power of imagination and you could focus it toward others? He's in a social justice setting. He said, think about this. Treat others as we would treat ourselves. He said, this is an ethic that is based purely on imagination. He said, you have to imagine the other. You have to imagine their stress and their needs. You place yourself and your mind in theirs, and only then act once you've made that connection. And he said, imagination like this will lead to compassion. And he says us to practice this skill and think in that direction. And then you can see spiritually in 3D. And he said he felt it was truly a skill that could be learned, like this woman. And then I found a lot of sources that said, oh, here's all the different ways and techniques that you could use to practice imagination. And remember, something that we were given right at creation. It's not something, a new thing we're trying, something that we've let some of us, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, because I don't think that you guys are lacking in this way. That it's, since it's part of our spiritual makeup, we just have to access it and don't be uncomfortable with it. So Katie Christian, which is interesting because she is a secular writer that gives tips on how to make your life more spiritual. So she gives steps on using imagination for spiritual practice. She said she had forgotten how to imagine. She'd forgotten the world is a magical place. It's full of miracles. And then she came to the idea that childlike faith is humility and wonder, and you need imagination for that. But it's not piety and intellect. And once she got away from that, she felt better, and she encourages people of faith that you should always ask questions. You should always wonder, and don't think about getting an answer for it. It should be unconditional about if you ever get an answer, or if you ever find out, it's the imagination of coming up with the question. It's the wondering about something that's important, not the answer. She said that'll come to you sometime, but don't worry, don't make it the purpose of why you're doing it. And she gave some examples, like read some children's books. They're simple, they're playful, they have a good message. They record your dreams. We've heard a lot of these before. Go explore art in any medium. I would add harder things like role play games and improv and theater games, which are less comfortable for people. Laughter yoga, which asks you to act silly all the time. But she said that her most important one was to go outside and do walking meditation. Embrace wonder and seek out any magic there. And when you find it through your imagination, then you turn it inward and it nurtures your soul. So on the opposite side, Oswald Chambers. Does anybody know Oswald Chambers? I think some of his work is associated with the Daily Bread, which is a little booklet that comes out with the daily readings in it. He's an 18th century Scottish clergyman. And he posed a question in one of his meditations: is your imagination God-starved? His idea was that we were imagining things and not God-like things. His theology is pretty heavy on total surrender. That's that subject of a lot of early Protestant Christianity. But he spoke of imagination in his own way. And I was struck by this quote by him. Nature to a saint, meaning a believer to him, nature to a saint is sacramental. If we are children of God, we have a tremendous treasury in nature, in every wind that blows, in every night and day of the year, in every sign in sky, in every blossoming, in every withering of the earth. There is a real coming of God to us if we will simply use our starved imagination. He spoke of spiritual concentration. Most likely it would be what we might say meditation today, being achieved because it brings the imagination into captivity when you reach that point of what he calls spiritual concentration. If you're overwhelmed, he says, your imagination is just looking in the wrong place. He says, use your imagination to go outside of yourself rather than inside of yourself. He felt that our prayers are not fruitful. He said there was a stultification of prayer in our day and time, which was in the 1700s. And it's because we don't have imagination. We can put ourselves deliberately before God through our imagination. It's the power God gives someone to get out of themselves and into a relationship that they were never in before. Now, I have to admit, one of the first places I started looking was even researching that I'm using today was before I even knew what I was going to do this. It was I was exploring Saint Ignatius and his imaginative prayer, and I was fascinated by a book that I recently read It's Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness by Father Gregory Boyle. And he used some of these practices with the gang members he worked with in California. And I felt like some of these Ignatian practices were something that I would like to try and achieve. Not easy. So he saw imagination as a tool to help us know and love God. One method that is given in his spiritual practices is to place ourselves fully within a story of the Gospels. This is one of his examples. You're an onlooker, you're a participant, or you're an onlooker who becomes a participant in whatever you decide. And then you give your imagination full reign. And he developed this because he was convalescing for a long time. And he, developed this really active daydreaming kind of life. So this example that one of the Jesuits guys who was writing this said, Jesus was speaking to a blind man. They're standing on the side of a road. Now you start to feel the Mediterranean sun. You start to smell the dust being kicked up by passersby that are walking past you. You can feel that your clothes are a little rougher, a little itchy, You can feel sweat rolling down your face. You can feel that you're a little hungry. You see the blind man's face. He looks desperate. And then you hear hope in his voice. You note that the disciples of Jesus are maybe a little irritated. And so you watch Jesus a little bit. You look at his eyes, the way he walks, the expression on his face. And then we hear him speak words that you've read in the Bible, that you've read other places. But he said, don't stop. The most important part is to go on. Imagine other words that might have been spoken. Imagine other actions, other deeds that might happen in the context of that story or right after that story. Lose yourself in the story the same way as you would if you were watching a movie. And don't worry about letting your imagination run wild, because as it runs, you could be presented with an insight that you wouldn't have gotten before. Ignatius said following Jesus, as a good Jesuit, is the business of all of our lives. To follow him, though, he said you have to know him. And you can only know him through imagination. We couldn't learn these things through scripture study, he says. You can't learn these things through theological reflection. You can go to places in your imagination that the intellect can never touch. Imagination could bring someone, in this case, Jesus, into our hearts, and it engages your feelings with the stories that you've read before. And one of these men who was writing an article said, what is good about this is that it gives us our Jesus, your Jesus, the Jesus that you see, the Jesus that you want to have a relationship with. And it doesn't have to be Jesus. It could be any teacher, anybody that you want to get closer to and know better. But he said, then you get a personal relationship because you daydreamed being with them, basically. If you watch someone's face and you hear their voice and you notice how other people respond to them, you're going to get these details that could make this person real to you, more than just a name, more than a spiritual or a historical figure. Now, there was this one gospel, John's gospel verse that came up a couple of times, and I don't know if it's too much out of context. The villagers were talking to the Samaritan woman, and she said, "Oh, let me tell you about Jesus. I just met this guy at the well," or whatever. And they said, "We've come to know him ourselves, not just from your visit." And so I saw that used a couple of times. In Ignatian practice, imaginative prayer, there are 7 ways that you can use it. And so I thought I'd briefly go through those. First one is imagine the sights and sounds of a biblical story, or it could be any story of a person that you admire their teaching. The second way is to allow your thoughts and feelings to be connected with objects. example that this one father gave was that on an altar, they always like to put things on it, like pumpkins and stuff for Thanksgiving, and their canned goods when they're focusing on helping others, their Christmas decorations or nativity scene or whatever, and then attach some of your feelings to those objects, and then grow a story or a series of pictures out of them. All these things they're saying are opening you up. It's a form of prayer that allows some sort of insight to come. And he said another way is that people are fairly uncomfortable doing this, but have a conversation with a spiritual leader that is no longer with us. You could have a conversation with Jesus. Imagine it. What would you say? What would he say? That sort of thing. Imagine walking on the beach with, one of your teachers, and that you wish that you lived at the same time, so you could ask him questions. He said, don't wish that, do it. Ask him. And if you get insights after this imagining time that you have, or you feel peace, or even feel a sense of forgiveness, then that was God speaking through your daydream, through your imagination that you were purposefully putting forward. Another thing, Anacia said that we should always put good interpretation onto another's actions and always assume good intentions. And so he said another thing you could do is imagine someone's from their point of view. Imagine being them, imagine being their situation, the things they're going through. Empathy carried out into, you've made a movie in your head out of it, right? Where you really are part of it. Another is, we've heard a lot of these things in terms of how to pray, but giving thanks. He said as an imaginative giving thanks prayer would be it could be a person, a relationship, a community, your pet, anything that you were grateful to. And then savor the gifts they gave you one at a time, remembering how they were given to you, how they were received, and so forth. And it's doing the same thing with people who have passed, remembering, bringing it back to life. But my favorite one was let go of your old images of God. This father said, Scripture contains many images of God. God is a father, a friend, a spouse, a mother eagle, a rock, a fortress, all kinds of things that you could imagine what your God looks like. And our old images of God can fade over time. When you're a little kid, you've got that image from the Sistine Chapel, the guy with the white beard and all, right? And it fades and it doesn't have as much meaning. It's hard to do a prayer towards something that doesn't have the same meaning. And they said you need a good image to pray. And so find a new one, because God is beyond any image. When you imagine and allow a new side of God to emerge, if you see God as a rock, and what does that rock mean to you? How do you imagine that? You've got new images, and the new images can bring meaningful pictures to you and insights. And then we're going to expand our understanding of this great mystery that we're all participating in. And so what I found is that after doing all this stuff is that I'm created by the imagination of God. I'm a creature who was designed, who was meant to imagine. And I found out through using this divine gift that we can connect with other people. We can create compassion and empathy. We can connect with our faith tradition in a meaningful way. We can pray with our hearts, not just our minds. We are part of the whole of creation. And when we use our imagination, we can become one with nature. And then we're praying just in that one state. We're in relationship with God when we are one with nature. We are whole, and we are whole beings as a creation of divine imagination. And so that's kind of some of the things that I thought about as I was looking through this. And I hope some of my words might have sparked your imagination and you might have some thoughts about those. I think I took about the right amount of time. Now, Zachary was going to do a little meditation before we close. So let me turn the screen back in his direction. All right, there you go, Zach.
First of all, may I ask if everyone's comfortable recording this meditation? Thumbs up.
Yeah, they're good. They're all good.
Okay, cool. So remember from the prayer, imagination is our key to unlocking the wonders of the world. So I want you to close your eyes, relax, and reach out and grab that key. You have it in your hand. What does it look like? How is it shaped? And now I want you to come with me to see what that key unlocks. And I want you to see garden paths that you haven't seen before. This is a new garden to you because it's your job to fill it with life, wonder, and magic. Any kind of thing, whether in the biological universe or in the universe of spirits, guides, and all kinds of beings. And also awaken the garden with all kinds of plants and animals and people as well. People that you've always wanted to say something to that you never had the time. Imagine saying it. Imagine their reaction. Imagine each of you uplifting the other. Imagine the groups of friends that you've always wanted to see together, meeting and getting along. In that way, we expand the idea of uniting together till we know we can make it stretch to the whole world. You can always return to this garden that you have populated with your own power and force of imagination. So as you come out of the meditation, open your eyes, but keep the garden and its key of imagination right here in your heart. Amen.
Thank you, Zach. Okay, thank you guys for listening to us. And we look forward if you have any comments or anything or any suggestions. Oh, got some hearts. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Jody and Zak, I thought, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, me too. I'll be quick. The subject of William Blake really touches me. And when he, those many years ago, said he alluded to humans, people being imagination, that connects directly with the new physics. Is everything we see and sense with our five senses, is it real or is it imagined? So the connection has been made so many years ago by William Blake. Thank
Mhm.
you. Great, great message. Great meditation, Zak. Thank you.
Very welcome. I'm honored.
I just wanted to say this was a terrific talk, guys, and I also wanted to make the observation that, like you, Jody, I had heard, oh shoot, from several different folks that the quit imagining things,
Yes.
because put away childish things and all that,
Mhm.
and back in the late 50s and early 60s, visioning was, in the psychological
Mhm.
field, and a lot of churches opposed that.
Mhm.
And it's always kind of struck me as ironic because, Jesus' parables were nothing but imaginative little
Right.
stories with a point to them.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
thank you for reminding me of that. And once again, great talk.
Well, thank you, Leon. Yeah, I considered, in fact, I even typed a little bit of saying all the negative messages we get about imagination. And then when I started to read it, I said, no, I don't want to put all those negative things in there, because there are people like, oh, that's just your imagination. And we were told that it, like this one woman said, it's something you put away, and how much it can do for us in our spiritual lives, as well as our, just our, keeping us centered and all, and our ability. I think about that TV show or movies. It's called The Chosen, that was so popular, with people. It was like the life of Jesus, but it's very much looks like a TV show where people are just people. And it became extremely popular. And I think that's part of it. It's like taking it and imagining what it would have been like, how Peter was breaking the Roman laws to do the fishing at night or whatever, and how he was trying, made all these people. But they were the imagination of the guys who did the movie. But you can do the same thing yourself. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Leanne. Yeah, Patty.
So can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm a psychologist and a teacher, and I taught early childhood for over 10 years.
Mhm.
And the way and then I taught young kids first and second. And the way I taught them was to use their greatest gift was imagination.
Mm.
And you've read that children lose that imaginative
Mhm.
wonder
Mhm.
and magic at about 9 years old.
Mhm.
And that is true because we teach them that.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
the way I taught my kid, oh, by the way, let me start with, this was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
It brought so many things together for me, because I've been thinking about the only way we touch God is to imagine that we are in this holy place, this holy moment, this holy, wonderful.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what life is about, imagining
Mhm.
that we are the gift of God or from God. So I just love this. And
Mhm.
then there's a lot of new stuff talking about imagination, and what you've given me, just to shorten it a little bit, is that just because I'm an adult, I probably never lost it, because
Mhm.
I'm kind of childish, and people have,
Childlike.
Childlike. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm childish, but anyway, I'll accept. So I never did lose some of that
Mhm.
wonder of watching an ant hill, or the butterfly that comes every morning. I talk to her,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that kind of wonder that
Yes.
when I went to San Francisco and stood in front of the bridge, as well as hug the trees,
Mhm.
that thing
Right. Right.
in San Francisco. But
Mhm.
that's just one tiny example of
Yeah. Yeah.
how I look at Robert, how I look at my coffee in the morning.
Mhm. Mhm.
So imagination for me is the biggest thing, one of the biggest things of my life. And
Yeah.
there's lots of new books. I opened my phone and there's a new kids book about imagination by a guy named LeVar Burton. I actually haven't read it yet.
Oh, he's
but
great.
I didn't even know about this.
Yeah.
And I follow LeVar Burton so much that I don't even know about him, so I'm gonna get it right now.
Yeah, go get that book right now. Yeah. Mhm.
So he talks about the kid's superpower. So this is all just wonderful for
Well,
me.
I'm glad. Like I said, I felt like I'd be preaching to the choir. I mean, imagination is part of unity. You know, it's a big part of unity. It's not hidden like in some other traditions where, oh, well, that wasn't, that's not part of scripture. You shouldn't say that or whatever.
You don't always use the term. I think
Right.
it's a matter of using the term and
Mhm,
understanding what imagination really
right.
includes.
Yeah. Yeah. Terry and Neil, I don't know which one. Put your hand up first, so you guys fight it out. Okay.
Go ahead, Terry.
I just wanted to mention that in unity, in the 12 powers,
Mhm.
imagination is there, and it's defined as the mental power to create and visualize, shaping thoughts and ideas into tangible reality.
Mhm.
And it was one of the very important things that happened to me while I was at school in Unity. Three times that I can recall, I thought about going to my counselor and saying, I'm dropping out.
Mm.
So finally I did, and I went to my counselor, Jim Gaither, and I said, I'm thinking about dropping out. And he said, why? And I said, because I can't get a grasp on a definition of God. I have given up. I don't believe in God. And he said, oh, you're not using your power of imagination. And it snapped something out of me and made me realize, well, I should allow God to expand more in my own mind and by using my power of imagination. Another thing is when you mentioned the Sistine Chapel, I don't know if you all have ever realized when you're looking up at that and you look over at the one of God in the right hand, there is an outline around God, which is supposed to be a little glimpse of heaven. But if you look at the outline, it's the shape of a human brain.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Forgot
Yeah.
that. I forgot.
And so what is that telling us? This is a story. This is once using the imagination of Leonardo da Vinci to have him tell us a little joke that we have to catch on to.
Mhm.
Is God is touching you, but God is in your mind.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
It's who you make it. I like that one spiritual practice that said, think of it, just get a different image in your mind, a
Yeah.
fortress, or whatever it is that you need right now, make it be that, and then place yourself in the context
and
of that.
that's what Jim Gaither
Mhm.
created for me.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
wonderful.
use your power of imagination, and
Mhm.
you can stick around.
Mhm.
Then I think, for me, I think that imagination starts with two words. What if?
Mhm.
And from there, the door is opened so that you can see all sorts of things that you never pictured before.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. This was a wonderful, wonderful, inspiring talk.
Thank you.
And using our imagination in our in the meditation was really useful. I don't know what kind of key most of you had in your hand, but I had two different ones. I kept jumping back and forth. One was just a big golden skeleton key,
Right.
like you
That's
get,
yeah.
And the other one was the key that I have on my own group of keys on my fob that I use. The one that I have is a little red key that says home.
Hmm.
And I had never thought about how actually, I bought it and thought, oh, I love this little key that says home and it's red and I love the color red. But I never did connect that how important that little red key is in my life and and
That's
everything.
the
It
symbol
opens,
for-
it opens more than the front door to my house.
That's right. It's such a
So,
symbol. Yeah.
Well, I'm very honored. Thank you so much for that.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, Neil.
Yeah, it's interesting that one of the pictures that I sent out,
Hmm.
major key,
Hmm.
big key, and don't ever give up your dreams.
Hmm.
I have so many notes that we don't have enough time to go, but I was thinking about how we used imagination growing up. All of us, you got into cartoons and think about the production company imagination. There's just, and when you watch that, and Jesse gets mad at me from time to time, I sit like a little kid in front of a screen with some of the cartoonish characters and Anna and I mean, you name it, Frozen, and I still enjoy that. And I was thinking also that in unity, prayer and meditation is so critical, and we we put ourselves into a prayerful state, and even with affirmations and denials, an affirmation is something you begin to imagine as you say it. This is where we want to go. And the other thing that I know about imagination, how powerful it is if you add emotion, energy, and motion. The mind, if you sit and visualize something you want to see manifest, and you put emotion to it, eventually it's so powerful that the mind begins to blur between reality and what you're imagining. The people that work for was it not Mary Kay, the other one? They put the car on the refrigerator, and every time I think that was Amway. Every time you walk by it, you visualize and see the car, and then you start seeing them on the street, all the color you want, and then eventually you find yourself at the dealership buying that color, that car, and having the money to pay for it. So a lot of things that we've actually manifested have been through vivid imagination in our lives. It's just
That's called the reticular activation system, that RAS, that's used. And so I heard a guy talk and he said, what you need to do is get your ass in gear, the RAS. And that's so true.
Now,
this is
now I'm trying to make that fit with what I know about a certain species of giraffe, which are called reticulated
giraffe.
Yeah.
a picture of an imagination of my electric bus.
There you go.
Electric Airbus.
Airbus, yeah,
Where is it taking you?
on cables.
Right.
Well,
That's next week, right, Terry? Where is it taking me?
one thing I wanted to clarify is when I said in the one we're one, that is the new motto of Leo the 14th.
Yeah, that's the Pope's new motto. Or the
In
new
one
Pope's
we
motto.
are.
Yeah.
John, you had your hand up, and then Bob,
Yes, thank you so much.
and then
It's
Bob.
ironic. Now, without detracting from RAS and however it is used, it is interesting that the company did not ask its representatives to visualize a world improved by the products. Let us visualize our products going out to improve the world, which is, I think, a bigger goal than getting that car.
Right.
I have a
Yeah.
16-year-old Toyota, and it goes everywhere. I keep it in good shape. I don't care what make or model it is. I just want to get there in capital letters. So I think that the final result that we want should be in the imagination, not only the stepping stone of the car, but also what is the best possible outcome of the company's products. Thank you.
Bob?
Anybody wants to go to see the Pietà, the original, I believe, is in St. Peter's, just inside the front door. And the queue to see it was out the door, and probably 100 people ahead of me when I got in it. And we wait your turn, and you get about 1/2 of a minute to be in front of it, but you can see it as you approach it and as you go by. But for anybody who's interested, there's a copy, a very accurate sculptural copy of Michelangelo's Pietà in the National Cemetery on Route 7, just as you leave Falls Church. And it's in the back
That's
of it, the farthest away from Route 7 as you can get and still be in the cemetery. And I have walked that because I happen to have a room in a house that was about a quarter mile from that statue. And I used to walk around the park every day, and I was so much of an exercise freak around it that suddenly an LTD Ford police started following me, and I decided, well, instead of going through, what I would do would go in the back end and come up upon the Pietà, and then I would go down about 100 feet from the Pietà, and there's another sculpture. At any rate, there's a Pietà in Virginia in the Memorial National Park, and the sad part about the one in Virginia is Mary's hand is out holding Jesus on her lap. I mean, it's a stop action image that Michelangelo imagined, made a reality. And Jesus is pictured as the size of a teenage boy. And she is sitting on a like a low bench, and Jesus is slipping down her knees because her legs are below her. And so she is reaching out to grab his farthest leg, and the other hand is under the right shoulder. And it's a magnificent example of stop action, catch the moment, imagine the moment. And of course, that's the essence of art, is to imagine. And Jesus said, greater things than these you would do.
Yeah.
We have imagination is our gift.
There's a lot more in that Robert took me to that, and I was in awe of that place. So if you get a chance, when we went, it wasn't kept very well, but there's a very imaginative piece of art that comes up out of the water, and there's figures coming up out of the water. And so if you want to enhance your imagination, go to that amazing place in Falls Church, it's right on Route 7. You don't have to go too far to get to it.
Yes.
Thank you, Robert, for sharing that.
Yes, and that one of the techniques was to find an object and concentrate and then create a story and bring that object to life. And
You did that.
Yeah, what an object you did. You just described this to me, and as you were describing it, I could see the object, and then I could imagine Jesus and Mary, and what she was feeling and so forth. So thank you.
Well, that's what Zak meditation did for us. It's that the key and the place and the garden was very powerful. I mean, a lot of the people that have given talks, all of us, I can't remember any time I didn't invoke my imagination and get into the story, especially Bible stories. They're so incredibly powerful, and you go there. You actually go there. And I remember we're talking about this, the Sistine Chapel when Jesse and I were in Europe. We were kind of touring around with our backpacks and everything, and we were in Rome. We kept asking for, where's the Sistine Chapel? And we spent half a day looking for it, and then somebody said, right over there. There was like a little stairway going downstairs, and Capella Sistina. Oh, okay. We went downstairs, and there was the magnificent paintings. And the weird thing was, all the hippies were there. They were lying on the floor, meditating and looking up at the ceiling.
Yeah.
So I want everybody to take a deep breath real quick. because I'm going to do something that might surprise you.
Hmm.